You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. This has been another agonizing week of ups and downs for the Cincinnati region. On July the 11th, the director of the local chapter of the National Urban League announced that based on evidence of real progress in race relations in the region, the National Urban League would hold its convention in Cincinnati next summer. City officials took the decision as a sign of a light at the end of the boycott tunnel, while boycott supporters took to the streets in protest. Then on Friday afternoon, Chief of Police Tom Stryker suspended Assistant Chief Ron Twitty, the highest-ranking African-American police officer, for filing what the chief described as a false report. The reaction was immediate and harsh. On Monday, the Urban League reversed its decision and decided not to come, landing real economic and psychological blows to ordinary citizens trying to make a living and to politicians trying to set an agenda.
This is a tremendous loss for the city. It makes our job much more difficult.
For a convention center which needs conventions, and for hotels and tourism workers who need tourists like cabbie Phil Jones, the Urban League cancellation is another kick in the teeth.
It's hurt us terribly. We've had one of the worst summers we've ever had. The people just aren't traveling anymore.
Urban League President Hugh Price said the National Urban League is upset by the timing of the suspension of Ron Twitty. African Americans are understandably concerned about this. The Urban League was also scared of demonstrations like this small one at their office back when the group said they were coming. Quote, "The prospect of pickets at local and National Urban League offices and events is utterly unacceptable because it would intrude our movement's critically important work."
I am now joined by Sheila Adams, the Executive Director of the Greater Cincinnati chapter of the Urban League. Sheila, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Good morning.
Let me take you back 2 weeks when just before you were able to make the announcement that the convention was going to come here. How would you at that point have evaluated the situation in Cincinnati in terms of moving forward, in terms of healing, in terms of setting in motion some sorts of policies and actions that were putting us on the right direction? Where did you think the city was at that point?
Well, I think the city was in the process of making movement. Slow as that might be, I think that there was absolute movement being made. I think there were policies.
And what would you point to specifically?
Well, I think there were a number of things that I would point to. One, the obvious, is the collaborative agreement. And having participated in the fairness hearing for the collaborative agreement, there were lots and lots of testimony that really spoke to how historic the agreement was, and that once we got into really the implementation stages, that it would be quite dramatic in terms of the impact that it could have on police-community relations. So I thought that was a major factor. Also, you have the work of Cincinnati Can that has been criticized, but I think has to be given credit for pulling together business leaders and community leaders across the community, even grassroots individuals, in addressing a number of issues, from economic inclusion to education, youth development, housing, health. They've tackled a wide range of initiatives, and I think you see a number of things that have been announced that shows that there is some commitment from the business community and others to really start tackling various issues that have been really problematic to us. Are we where we need to be? Absolutely not. But I certainly could see that there was some movement.
Now, my understanding is that you and city officials, and I'm not sure who else, really lobbied the National Urban League, the national decision-making, to bring the convention to Cincinnati next summer. And what was involved in that? I mean, that was not just a decision made in New York. You really were out there pushing for it, right?
Well, yes, I was pushing for it. This is actually the second bid that our city has put in for the national conference. We had wanted it back in '99. And so we did have, I think, an excellent bid that was put forward. There had been a site visit by the National, and actually the city had been selected last February prior to the civil unrest in our community. So that we thought we had a city at least primed to hold a very productive conference even before that situation occurred. And even after that, we certainly thought that this was a good venue to hold a conference, primarily because the National Urban League and the affiliates do have a civil rights, that is a portion of their agenda, not the entire agenda, but it's a portion of it. so that the very issues that we are dealing with in Cincinnati could have been focused, and you could focused on and really looked at and examined, reported out in a way that really would have brought, I think, some substance to the dialogue, not only in Cincinnati, but it would have, of course, focused on us, but then focused on what's happening nationally, because obviously nationally we're still having many, many issues. So yes, we did, we talked with National, and we did meet with them, and I think the Convention and Visitors Bureau actually did reach out to them to encourage them to come. So yes, there was some reaching out to National, but I wouldn't say it was I think it was something that you would do if you would want to bring any conference to the city.
Going into that, you certainly knew that there would be people, particularly those supporting the boycott, who would be unhappy with that success, the success in getting the convention here. You knew there would be a reaction. Did the reaction surprise you, the fact that you were picketed?
No, actually, I think after we made the announcement, I said, I guess the pickets will start. No, I was not surprised.
So you were prepared for that?
I was prepared. I think yes.
What's your view about the boycott in general?
Well, I think in general, certainly the issues that they are speaking to related to police-community relations, economic inclusion, and educational issues that they are dealing with, the Urban League has always been very supportive of moving the agenda around those issues. We've always spoken out on those issues. We have not chosen to use the boycott as our methodology for pushing those issues forward. And I think there is room in a community for different types of methodology to move to address issues.
Okay. You make the announcement, and if I have the sequence right, the very next day, last Friday, this is airing on Sunday, so 2 Fridays ago, Lieutenant Colonel Ron Twitty is suspended. Did you have any prior warning of that? Did you have any inkling that that was about to happen?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
What was your reaction when you heard, not so much, I'm not asking you about the charges about Ron Twitty directly, but the way the city has handled it, that public announcement, the press conference, the suspension with pay, what was your reaction when you heard that was what was happening?
I was shocked, quite honestly. I thought it was a complete overreaction to a situation that seemed to be a minor incident, a fender bender, if you would. Someone at that highest level, I would have thought that there could have been handled in a more respectful manner.
How would you have liked to have seen that handled? How do you think that should have been handled?
Well, not really knowing the city procedure necessarily, I think it could have been handled in a more private manner in terms of getting the investigation further along than just suspending him immediately with a press conference. I think that public really embarrassment without all of the investigation being completed, I think was unnecessary for someone not only with his long tenure in the police department, but also with his fine record. And not only the record in doing police work, but his record within the community and his giving back to the community.
Once that took place on Friday afternoon, how quickly did you hear from the national office that they were worried, upset, whatever? How quickly did you hear from the national office of the Urban League?
Actually, I did not speak to Hugh Price until Monday morning.
Monday morning.
Monday morning.
And when he called you, did he call you with a question or did he call you with a decision that they were going to reverse the decision?
He actually called me with a discussion, and that he was having a discussion with his key staff that morning, after which they would announce their decision.
And what did you tell him that morning? Did you still want the convention here?
I did. I've worked so hard, yes, I did want the convention here. While I was very unhappy with the way the Colonel Twitty situation had evolved, I still did not want National to back away from their decision to come, because the very issues around leadership in terms of decision making in our community, that's been really one of the issues that has been called to question time and time again, not only by the boycotters, but by a number of us. That very reason is the reason why National should have reinforced its reason for coming. And and actually waited to see what would happen with Colonel Twitty. But that's a part of the problem that we have, the problems that we have in Cincinnati. The leadership and the decisions that are made that have had an impact across the board, not only on African Americans, but it impacts all of us who live in this community.
So I started out by asking you where you were 2 weeks ago. Where do you think this community is today?
I'm an eternal optimist. You have to understand that. I believe that we are going to get this right eventually in this community. I think we've had setbacks in a number of ways, but I think we still know that we have a community that is worth salvaging, a community that we have to put some more time and energy in, and I think we just have to go back to moving forward programs and services that are important. We have to look at our decision making, we have to question our leadership, we have to hold the course in Cincinnati. And whether it's an urban league holding its course, whether it's our politicians, our business leaders, community, grassroots, all of us have to be committed to make this city better. Losing this conference won't turn the city backwards. It does impact on its image, but it is just a conference. We have to move forward. We have to move forward and do the kind of reporting out and monitoring of the progress that the national conference was going to bring to Cincinnati. It wasn't just going to be a feel-good conference.
Have you, wearing your hat as director of the Urban League, have you picked up the phone and talked to Charlie Lucan about the Twitty situation and the aftermath of the decision of the national office deciding not to hold the convention? Have you picked up the phone and talked to Stryker? Have you tried to use the league, the good graces of the league, to deal with the immediate situation?
Well, certainly Charlie Lucan and I have talked. We did talk last week. I've talked with his staffers. We have sit down and met with individuals from the police department, and we've gotten a report. And we've done this along with the NAACP. We actually did have a press conference where we stepped out and not only supporting Colonel Twitty, because we thought that was very important to do that, but also asking for a fair and equitable resolution to this situation. We would like to see him reinstated. We would like to see the investigation pulled back from the county. So we have made it known that the steps we'd like to see taken. I have not talked to Stryker, but I certainly have talked to other city officials regarding this issue.
We're almost at the end here. I want to let you remind people, what is the mission and what does the Urban League do?
Well, the Urban League has a 52-year history in Cincinnati, incorporated in 1910 at the national level. That's the National Urban League, and I need to remind people it was the national conference, not our local Urban League conference. We do really leveling the playing field, reducing the barriers to racism, and we do that through leadership in our programs that deal with employment, comprehensive employment, youth development, leadership development. We also do advocacy. These are programs and services, and we serve over 10,000 people every year. Right now we have over 60 kids in our freedom schools, and we have a big education summit that will be occurring in September that we already have over 900 youth signed up for. So we really work in the trenches, delivering services on a day-to-day basis to primarily African Americans, but really to all who are at risk and who need services and benefits as it relates to economic self-sufficiency and really social and educational advancement.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here. Good luck with your work, and let's see what happens. Maybe this conference can come in 2004, if not 2003.
That's possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stay tuned. The Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County announced the closing of 5 branch locations this week. After the break, the director of the library. Welcome back. At a time when local public institutions are under intense attack, it is hard to imagine a more beloved and trusted government function than the public library. The Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County consistently attracts one of the highest rates of usage of any public library in the United States. As a result, when the library announced budget cuts that would force the closing of 5 small neighborhood branches, the news hit hard.
The library is a tremendous resource in any community. It offers more than thousands of books to read. It offers many other services, technological and social. Fabian Obrecht uses the Green Hills branch for communication.
Since I'm from Switzerland, I use their internet quite often to communicate with my family and friends back home.
Susan Casey has been coming to the Green Hills branch since she was 7 years old and says she's upset that her neighborhood library will soon be closing its doors.
It's got such a great feel. It's a neighborhood library. The librarians are so friendly and they help you find books. It's a place where you can really read books.
Library Executive Director Kim Fender says all of the branches that are closing are small and within 2.5 miles of other branches. Fender says the funding shortage will mean an inconvenience for some.
There's really not a good answer except to say that we hope they'll make the trip to one of the nearby branches and allow us to continue to give them library service at that location.
But it will pose a problem for many people, like students who use the Bond Hill branch.
I think it will probably have a big impact because mostly all of the other libraries are farther out and for maybe people that don't have transportation besides the bus.
Green Hills officials say they are, quote, shocked and dismayed, end quote, by news their community's branch will be closing, and they want the library board to meet with village officials to reconsider the decision. Dana Eubanks, 12 News.
I am now joined by Kim Fender, the Executive Director of the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. Kim, welcome to Newsmakers.
Hi, Dan.
The tax that supports the library, where does the money come from that supports the public library?
The public libraries in Ohio are supported by personal income tax collections. And what happens at the state level is there's a law on the books that says 5.7% of the taxes collected are distributed to the counties across the state, primarily for library use, although the fund is called the Library and Local Government Support Fund. So there is some use of those funds for another purpose, but in most counties it goes to the libraries only.
When we say personal income tax, that means you exclude the corporate side of the tax. It's just what individuals pay, and then you get 5% of that total. 5.7% of that total. And
Yes,
that funds what percentage of your total budget?
Typically for us that's around 95% of our budget.
Okay, so this is the overwhelming bulk of your income.
That's correct. It's really our primary funding source.
And how much has that fund declined this year?
This year what we're seeing is a drop of $4.3 million in the amount coming to our library alone. Across the state, of course, that's a much larger number. Other counties are seeing drops also.
4.3 million out of a total budget of?
Our budget was around 52 million.
Okay.
And now we're planning to get 48 million from that fund.
Okay. All right. So this is just a function of the declining economy.
That's correct.
Why is it that you decided that the way to handle this decline was by closing these 5 libraries? And I just want to make the point. The libraries are in Bond Hill, Deer Park, Elmwood Place, Green Hills, and Mount Healthy. Those are the 5 branches that we're talking about. Why close those 5?
Well, we had to do something fairly drastic. We did not find out about the extent of the cut until mid-June, June 17th. We got the numbers of what our distribution would be for July. One of the very complicated things about library funding is we get our money each month on the 15th, and our last payment comes on December 15th. That's truly when we know what our budget for the previous year was. It's kind of an awkward way to plan ahead. In this case, we know on June 17th that we were going to get significantly less in July, and indeed when the money came it was 3.1 million. Part of the problem with the cut is that it happened that it's between July and December, so we have to save a very large amount of money in a very short period of time. If we had known, for example, in January that the drop was going to be that significant, we could have spread that out a little further and had more time to plan. But in this case, we had to react very, very quickly, having only 6 months to cut $3 million from our budget.
Now, my understanding from what I've read is that the employees at these branch libraries will be absorbed into the rest of the system. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're not laying
then where
off.
are the savings?
Well, the savings are, when we found out on June 17th that the money was going to be less, we put a hiring freeze on. So we had a few positions open at that time, and since then we've gotten additional openings, and we'll be continuing that hiring freeze. But that gave us a number of vacant positions that we can move these people into and not have to let them go. If we had not done that, we would have been in a completely different situation.
So the real savings are still out of personnel.
It is. That's the biggest portion of our budget.
Let me make one, we just read off the list, and although Bond Hill is in the city of Cincinnati, the rest of them are all outside the city of Cincinnati.
Yes,
They're
they
in
are.
small towns and villages. Do any of those entities, or does the county government provide any money for funding?
No, we get no local funds for the library service at all.
Okay, so the community of Green Hills, for example, which was saying it would like to, the leaders of Green Hills would like to sit down with the library, they don't actually contribute any money.
No, we don't have any local taxes. We don't get any money from the governmental agencies that have the libraries. The county or the city do not pay part of the library's budget.
Is this a permanent decision? Is there any chance that, gee, you pull back from these 5 libraries, but a year and a half from now, you could move back into them?
That would be very difficult. We are treating them as permanent closings. Because 4 of them are in rental locations, we do need to vacate those as part of the savings. So, and that would require us to, of course, get rid of the furnishings and the collection, which would make reopening in a year and a half very costly and difficult to do.
So that's unlikely.
This is
a permanent pullback.
Yes.
Are there other libraries similar to these, similar size, small libraries that are within 2.5 miles of a larger, newer library that may be on the block in the future?
Well, we really, until we know what the numbers are going to look like for 2003, we do know that we're expecting to have less money in 2003 than we have in 2002. But, of course, closing even 5 branches doesn't save us the entire $3 million. We're having to take very stringent cuts in our operating budget besides these. So we'll be living with a very tight operating budget going into 2003.
As I understand the library funding and library budget, the money that you get from the state tax, the personal income tax, pays both operating and capital, right? You pay.
That's right.
You pay for the building of new libraries, or the renovation of an older library, out of these same funds. Is
Out
that
of
correct?
these same funds, that's correct. Unlike some organizations that perhaps do a bond issue to
That's
do
right.
that, we don't do that.
Are you not allowed to do that?
No, we are allowed to do that. The stance of the board has been for many years that because we were getting sufficient funds from the state, we would not ask the local community to provide additional funding to pay for their libraries, that we would live within the budget we were getting from the state. And so rather than doing a bond issue or accumulating any debt for the library, we would put money aside in multiple years until we had enough to build the facility, and then we would go forward with the construction.
How does the Hamilton County system compare to some of the other large urban systems? So, let's take Columbus, for example. How many branches? What's
Columbus
budget?
actually has a budget that's very close to ours. It's I only have 2001 numbers for them because that's what was published most recently. And their budget was around $48 million last year, but they're operating a main library and 20 branches.
And you're operating a main library and
we were operating 41 branches.
Okay.
So, and Cleveland actually has an operating budget that is larger than ours and is operating a main library and 28 branches.
Okay, so this is the most branched of the libraries
Yes,
of the
it
big
is.
city. Is this then just inevitable that some of these smaller libraries were going to close because in the modern world these are not efficient?
Well, there are some efficiencies in combining and consolidating branches, and some of our planning did call for 2 of these facilities to eventually have been combined with a larger branch once we had the funds to do the construction of that facility. For example, we are planning to build a new branch in St. Bernard, and our plan was to combine St. Bernard and Elmwood Place into that one facility. The same is true in Bond Hill. We have plans to build a facility in Bond Hill that would combine Bond Hill and Roselawn. And so in some ways, these closings are just coming a little ahead of the new facility being quite ready to take over in that location.
We have less than a minute. What happens to those building plans?
Well, they're on hold until we can get sufficient funding to build. Right now, the board's stance still is to get the full funding before we go forward with construction. So.
Does that mean that you're setting money that you get from this tax aside in a reserve fund so that there are reserves there, in a reserve building fund?
We do in a normal year. We won't be doing that this year. And I do have to say the St. Bernard project is going ahead. The Bond Hill project is on hold. St. Bernard was fully funded when this hit.
Any possibility of a reevaluation of the decision about going for bonds to the local community?
I'm sure the board will be considering that as an option as they look at what we're doing with our funding.
Okay. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
being here
Dan.
this morning. And the library is important to an awful lot of us. I spend an awful lot of time there. And and we'll just see what happens.
Thank you.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the women and the men shaping our community for the future. Have a good week.